Hello.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, sir.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, guys. Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah. So, swimmers do more kicks than a soccer player, more flips than a cheerleader, more sets than a volleyball player, and more yards than a football player. And do you still think it's easy? Today, in the middle of the pandemic situation, where you cannot go to your favorite summer spot, we, the Leo Club, are hosting a live session with Rehan Jahangir Pocha. He is a six-time national champion Indian swimmer, Olympian and Arjun Award winner, and who specialized in backstroke, butterfly, and individual medley events. From the Karnataka Olympic Association. He will be telling us about his journey of becoming an Olympic swimmer and getting the Arjun Award, his inspiration and motivation and difficulties. Hello and welcome, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm doing well. I'm at home. I live in Pune, which is, as you know, quite a bad situation in Maharashtra. So we've all been just sitting at home. All of my friends who are swimming, playing golf, all of us are just trying to figure out ways to stay fit at our own homes and have not got to do anything else really apart from that. So this is nice to see people here who have showed up to listen to what I have to say. And as much as I've been getting a lot of thank yous for doing something like this, I thank you all for being here and being my audience and hopefully learning something from everything that I share with you all today.
Surely, sir. So can we start with the live session, sir?
Absolutely, whenever you all are ready.
Okay. So let's just start off with your childhood. When was the first time you started swimming, sir?
So I started swimming actually by default, where a lot of as a child actually when I was all the way I'll take it all the way back to I was born a premature baby. So that means that I was delivered a couple of months before the expected due date. And because of that, I was put into an incubator and I was very weak. And as I grew up as I was 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years old, I was still very weak where my lungs, I couldn't breathe too well. And my lungs were extremely weak, not strong for a child. And because of that, I used to get regular, coughs, cold, bronchitis, lots of issues. And so my parents discussed this with our family doctor, and our family doctor suggested that I learn swimming because he felt that swimming will be good for my lungs, it will strengthen my lungs, and it will be therapeutic for me. And because of that, I decided to learn the sport. And that's how actually I learned it, by default, really. And ever since I was, I think ever since I can remember, from the age of 6 or 7, I've been very competitive. So it was only natural that learning swimming would convert into competitive swimming and then racing even as a child. But the funny story behind this is that as a kid I used to I don't know how many of you all have heard of Shamak Davar's dance classes. Anybody has? Can they say yes? The Shamak Davar Institute? No, so he's choreographer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so some have. So I used to go to his dance class one day and in Bombay, and I used to go to swimming class on the other day. And at one point, my dad came up to me and said that I have to decide whether I want to swim or I want to dance. And so I chose dance because as a young kid, who would want to choose diving into a freezing cold swimming pool every day, sometimes twice a day. And so I said I'm going to learn how to dance well. But as a child, I was extremely shy. I had very, very low self-confidence. And that day when I decided to dance, I went to dance class, and the dancing instructor told me and the rest of my friends in the class that today is going to be the first day of partner dance day. So all the boys in the class, and we were all of 7 years old. So all the boys in the class were told that we have to now go look around the class and find one girl, and this girl is going to be our partner for the next month. So now basically for a shy kid such as myself, the thought of dancing with a girl was so terrifying that luckily for me, before the class started, I ran out of the class. My dad was still in the parking lot. I went to my dad and said, "Dad, I want to swim." So this is it, when you look back, I don't know whether this was a good decision or a bad decision, but I've always been competitive. So like I said, it was only natural that my learning how to swim would convert into competitive swimming.
Okay, so you had an option between dance and swimming, and
Yeah.
was this given as a preference by your dad as an occupation and just like as a hobby at
See,
the initial stage?
I was 7 years old, so the question or the decision to choose one of the two was more around the traffic I had to drive through because of Bombay and the traffic that Bombay offers. So he basically said that it's driving me mad, driving you, taking you one day to dance and one day to swimming, and as parents, I never really, like you say, if you talk about an occupation, even through my swimming career, I never till the 12th standard really, in Bangalore. I studied in Bangalore. We call it PUC. So 11th and 12th. After the 10th is the 11th and 12th. So till the 12th standard, I never really had pressure from my parents in terms of what career I should choose. And but that was because they knew I was very conscientious about what I wanted to do with my life, and But at the age of 7, it wasn't really about a career. I think they for them it was just getting me out of the house and keeping me active and doing something or pursuing a craft or pursuing a hobby. And I enjoyed dance, even though I was shy. I remember from ever since I can remember, I've always enjoyed the stage. I've always enjoyed the spotlight, really, So whether it was racing for my state or my district or my country, I'm sure if I had chosen to dance, I would have been equally happy. And but like you say, all that is history now.
Okay, but as a child, or when you suppose in your 11th or 12th grade, when you're like into taking the decision of considering an occupation, like in my 12th grade, I was like, okay, engineering it is, because that's okay, I might get a job with it. Didn't you have that fear that, okay, if I take up swimming, then stuff might go wrong?
No, so I absolutely did. And to give you a little background, by the time I got to the 12th, I was 15 years old, right? So I had already been swimming competitively for 8 years. And when I was 15 years old, I was, and I'm only saying this in context of your question. I don't mean to, brag, but I was already India's national champion. I was also, at 15, I was already the Open national champion. So I was beating 25 and 30-year-olds also. So that is the level at which I was swimming and also winning internationally. But even then, even though I was swimming at such a high level, I was not sure of whether I want to continue swimming from the age of 16 to the age of, say, 23 and 24, which is where we start looking at jobs and we start looking at careers, like you say. So in the 12th, after the 10th, in Bangalore, we had a choice of combination of subjects. I'm not sure how it is for y'all. So I chose to do a combination of physics, chemistry, maths, and electronics. So that was my PCME combination. And I did that keeping in mind that I may want to be an engineer and do the engineering course in Bangalore. And so that's why it's nice, I think, talking to all of you, because you will relate to this. And so, like I said, my 11th and 12th were done choosing PCME as my combination. So I would have the option of doing my engineering after the 12th. And once the 11th and 12th got done, I had a decision to make where I could continue swimming very seriously. And if I was to do that, there was no chance I could pursue engineering at a high level, because I don't know if y'all are aware, but to swim competitively at an international level, we train 11 times a week, which means we train twice every day, and we get half day break on a Sunday or a Wednesday. And in between our swim sessions, we are doing fitness. So that leaves very, very little time for college and academics, which I still figured out a way to do. So after the 12th, I had to decide, do I take engineering because I had done the 11th and 12th combo, or do I do an easier course and choose to pursue swimming? And if I chose to pursue swimming, it would mean that I was trying to qualify for the 2004 Athens Olympics. So my decision was, do I continue? I mean, I was always going to continue swimming, but do I choose engineering, which is going to be extremely hard to do, to balance out with sport at this higher level of trying to reach the Olympics? Or do I choose an easier course? So when you talk about fear and you talk about a risk, I was taking a huge risk because the course I ended up choosing was Bachelor of Arts, So I did psychology and journalism. Now, 10 years back or 12 years back, the value of an arts course versus the value of an engineering course, right? So that was a big risk that I took, but I took that risk and said that on the flip side, if I give priority to my swimming career, at the end of 3 years, I might be an Olympian in 2004. Now, when you look back, and I'm sure this will come up in questions later, I failed to qualify for the Olympics in 2004. So it's not like every decision I took turned to gold and I struck success immediately. But hopefully we'll get to that through your next few questions.
Okay, just a follow-up question with that. Like when you did represent India for the Olympics, how did you feel, sir?
So it's very difficult to put into a few minutes the emotion of actually getting there, but I'll do my best. But before I talk about the Olympics, what was more full of emotion and overwhelming was actually qualifying for the Olympics. So the way it's done in India is, or actually anywhere in the world, is to qualify for the Olympics in swimming, you have to be number one in the country for that year. That's your rank at the open national level. And you have to hit certain qualifying standards. These are timings that are sent by, you have FIFA in football, you have FINA in swimming. So FINA, the association, the world body, sends in certain qualifying timings, which are based on the previous year's world championships, so top 50, top 60 in the world. So these are very, very high standard of swimming, and my qualifying time that I had to try and achieve was for the 200-meter butterfly event. And I took, considering that I had tried extremely hard to try and qualify for 2004 and failed, and then worked another 4 years and tried all over again. And I finally qualified on the last possible day, where I still remember it was the 4th of July, and I had two chances. I was in Australia, and in my first chance, I missed the qualifying time by 0.3 of a second. Now, y'all all know what that is. That's like half a second. And that's how much I missed it by over 200 meters of butterfly swimming. So, and I did that in the evening, and then I had one more chance to qualify the next morning, and I finally made it. So for me, our timings are displayed on a huge display screen. So I touched the wall, I looked back, I looked at the display, and I realized that I had finally made it. So for me, to qualify for the Olympics, honestly, was as big, if not a bigger high, than actually swimming at the Olympics, because it was 20 years of a career that made me realize my dream. And if you were to fast forward 1 month later from that day to actually swimming at the Olympics, my coaches, my parents were watching me live represent India. And apart from that, my swim team back in Bangalore, which was close to 500 kids, were all sitting in one room, in the gym, on a big screen and watching me race as well. So I always say this, and I don't know how many of y'all have watched any of my lives on Instagram, where I say that though swimming is an individual sport, I was very lucky because I got to share my success with an entire team. So it was multiplied so much more, and physically being at the Olympics, where you're having a lunch in a hall, in a room, sitting next to Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, and there's Usain Bolt, grabbing McDonald's in front of you in the line, and you've got Michael Phelps swimming the same event as you. And apart from all the, that's the stars around you, though it's a simple way of saying, you get to, in the opening ceremony, stand with and the team strength at that point was 62. So you get to stand with 62 other Indians from a country of what's our population, 1.1 or 1.2 billion people, and you get to be part of that group of elite athletes that are chosen to represent the country. And you're there as part of the Indian contingent, and at the opening ceremony, you're part of that group, and a few yards down the line you can see the Indian flag and the flag bearer. And that moment for me and my coach and my parents was so special. So swimming at the Olympics, competing with the world's best, being part of moments that are literally, goosebump moments whenever I think of them, and also realizing a dream that was 2 decades long was so special. So like I said, I can go on and on about just, this one moment forever and ever, but I think I've managed to, keep it compact and share all the emotions I felt when I, competed in the Olympics.
So, do you think swimming has inculcated any personal trait or special quality in you?
See, this is a difficult question because it's given me a lot of positives and some negatives. So I'll tell you what. There is a talk that I do for corporate offices. I do it for colleges such as yours as well. So it's a 45-minute talk, and the theme of the talk is called Lessons Learned from a Lifetime in Sport, right? So, and I speak for 45 minutes on, like you're saying, the things that I've learned from swimming. So if I were to talk about maybe 2 or 3 of them, I think one of the things that sport, not swimming, but sport has taught me is that success and achievements take time. So if I were to use one word, I would say sport has taught me patience. Now you can talk about working hard through patience and then define it as perseverance, right? So sport has taught me patience. Sport has definitely taught me perseverance. And because, and I asked, I think Tejaswini or Sahiti, one of them, before I came live, what audience age group I was speaking to. Now I'm 33 years old. Right. And she said between 18 to 23. And I know that when I was 18 years old, in fact, when I tried to qualify, like I said, for the 2004 Olympics, I was 16 years old. So you can understand the pressure that a 16-year-old felt, right? But so a little younger than some of y'all. But the point I'm making is at that age, when you're between 18 and 21, we are very excitable, we are very passionate, but we are also very impatient. Okay, so we have all these big goals and dreams in our minds, and we truly believe, and so did I, that if we are good at something and then we have support and we work hard at it, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very soon. And we go into, our lives, we go into our goals really with that attitude. So it's a very positive attitude to have, that I'm going to be successful at what I've decided to do. But sometimes you end up very disappointed, like I did, and that was a huge learning for me in 2004. And like I said, when I was 16 years old, I was already India's national champion in the open category. So just to give you a little bit of perspective of this, I used to swim 8 laps of a swimming pool, and by the second lap, the press, the photographers from different media houses, Times India and wherever else, would be standing outside the swimming pool and already taking my photo. So the race is not even halfway completed, but they are taking a photo because they want an action shot where they have decided basically that I am going to win the race. So that is the sort of, arrogance or that was taught to me, though I never had it, or the overconfidence or the self-confidence that I had, that people believe that I'm going to win every time I race. And I took that attitude into the qualifying of the 2004 Olympics, believing that I'm going to be successful. And I failed. Part of my career, I realized that you can't decide really when you're going to be super successful. What you can do is you can work hard. You can set a plan in place. And I did. I worked extremely hard for 2004. And you can do everything in your power to try and achieve what you want in your life. But beyond that, you cannot control the result. And the sooner you understand that, the better it is for you. For those who manage to in their first, shot at success, go out and be successful. Good luck to you. I'm happy for you. But there are many who are very deeply disappointed at the end of it, which is why I feel that for this age group, it's always important to learn that success comes. Sometimes it comes a little later than you plan for it, but it comes if you're consistent in your hard work and clear in your, setting of your goals, which is, I think, the biggest lesson I learned. I put 2 or 3 adjectives into place when I told you this, but the perseverance, patience, and understanding that success and stardom and everything else that you consider success, whether it is fame, whether it is money, whether it is a great social circle, whatever it is that you define as success, takes time. So give yourself time. This is my lesson that I want to share with you.
Truly, sir.
So
Okay,
from
that's all.
swimming to golf, that must have been an interesting journey. So how was the transition?
Okay, so I've been playing golf now for 7 years. This is the second sport that I've decided to, play. I don't really honestly know of too many sportsmen, Indian or international, that have finished one career over so many years and then decided to start all over again. And the reason I use the word all over again is because anything you start, you have to start at the bottom of the ladder. I could not pick up a golf club and say, okay, now that I've picked up a golf club, I'm going to be national champion in golf. It does not work like that. So like I said, and I've been doing it now for 7 years. And the transition, if you were to go back to when I started, I loved the sport. I loved learning a new craft. I loved everything that went into the process of getting better as a golfer or as an athlete, really. But what I hated is that I am used to, like you've read in my introduction, being very successful at sport and winning every time I decided to compete. So I went from that to starting to finish last all over again. So that was a very, very big challenge for me mentally and also for my ego, because I believe I have a huge ego when it comes to competing. I may not have an ego in everyday life, but when it comes to winning and competing, I have a huge ego. So for me, that's been very, very hard. And I think honestly, the hardest part to accept that, like I told you earlier, it's going to take time, but I have set a plan in place. I have set a process where I'm working with some great coaches. I'm extremely hardworking. I'm disciplined, where I have to learn from swimming that I have to give myself time and I have to have the patience, and eventually success will come. Now, how much success comes, I cannot predict. I don't know whether I'll ever be as good a golfer as I was a swimmer. But at least I know I'm trying to do everything I can to get there. So I would call it a love-hate relationship, honestly, because I love the sport. I really do. And I love practicing. I love training for it. And I hate competing at it. But that will slowly change as I start climbing in my rankings and, climbing that ladder. But the important thing is I love practicing. And I love the sport just to play it for the sake of playing it. So that's basically been Tejasvi, my transition.
So which one would you say is the top sport, like swimming or golf?
So each one has its own, challenges. Training physically, swimming is, I think, one of the hardest sports you can pick across any sport. Because like I said, 11 sessions, we would average close to 80 kilometers in a week. So for those of you who have swum in a swimming pool, which is 50 meters long, 2 laps of a swimming pool is 100 meters. And so if you swim 20 laps of a swimming pool is a kilometer, and then you multiply 20 by 7. So 140 to 150 lengths twice a day for 11 sessions a week for 15 years. So you can understand the sort of stress that swimming puts on you. And then you're battling the environment. You're battling wind. You're battling extremely cold water. So physically demanding swimming was really hard for me. Golf also is, where you're practicing close to 6 hours every day, but it still doesn't push your body to the limit of crying in pain. It's just not that sort of sport. Of course, you can come back and work out and work hard in the gym and do high intensity fitness work and still push your body. But between the two, I think mentally, golf is a very, very challenging sport also, because a swimming race, my races last for 2 minutes, right? It would take me 2 minutes to swim 200 meters of butterfly. But a golf round, competitive round of golf takes 5 hours. And to win a trophy, you have to do 4 days of that. So that's 20 hours of golf to win a trophy versus 2 minutes of swimming. So the mind is so much more occupied. It's under pressure for that much longer. So every sport, I think any sport today has its own challenges. But to answer your question, physically, swimming was harder. Golf isn't as hard, but I would say mentally, golf is extremely difficult as well.
Sir, you were also a travel writer. Like you visit so many places and destinations. So can you share few of your funny experiences that occur in any of your travels?
So travel actually for me is a passion, but it started, I would say it started way back in 1997 when I was 11 years old, because that was the first time at 11 I was chosen to represent India at the Asia. It was was called the Asia Pacific Championship. So and I went to Chinese Taipei. So that was my first travel that I did, and I was. You can imagine in 1997, a little Indian boy goes to the Chinese. So it's close to Hong Kong, and you're absolutely blown away by everything you see in terms of technology, and they were so much more advanced than we were back in 97. And the food that's on offer, the toys for a little kid to go into a department store and see some of those Chinese and Japanese toys, it was just mind-blowing for me. So culturally, it was a very, very overwhelming experience. And since you mentioned funny, it's difficult to off just off the top of my head think of what is funny. So if I may answer it a little differently, to tell you what I enjoyed most, in terms of my travel, is in 2009, I went to Rome for the World Championships. And normally travel for me till I stopped swimming was always full of pressure, because you can't really enjoy a city and enjoy the food and the culture if you are there for a championship and if you are there for a tournament. You can't eat what you want. You can't eat roadside food. You can't go out sightseeing because you're tiring your legs and your muscles. So we basically, whether we are in the world's most beautiful city or not, our routine is hotel to swimming pool to hotel. So the only sightseeing we get to do is the bus ride from the hotel to the pool and back. But in Rome, we had 2 or 3 days after the tournament. And for those of you who do not know or have not seen the city, it is the most beautiful city you can ever visit. And for me, my experience of getting to see over 2 days, getting to see Rome was just beautiful. And like I said, it's very difficult for me to think of a funny experience from travel, but this was definitely the most beautiful, overwhelming experience I had, because you get to see the 2 places that you get to see are St. Peter's Basilica, where you have the Pietà. I don't know if you all know. Of course, many of you all know what that is. So that's Mother Mary, and there's Jesus Christ in his arms. It's a sculpture. It's a world famous sculpture, and you stand in front of it, and you start crying. And it's not it's a very difficult emotion to explain. Why you are so emotional when you look at it, but it is just absolutely, it's just a beautiful thing. And then you have the Sistine Chapel, which was, and all know of the Sistine Chapel, where you've got these amazing sculptures on the ceiling. And you just stand and look at it, and that's all you do for an entire hour. So you're overwhelmed with how much talent there was so many 100 years ago, and the things people did. And that's when I honestly realized that I will always be extremely passionate about travel and learning and seeing what the world has to offer.
Sir, then coming to your motivational speeches, how did it all start?
So with motivational speaking, I actually, when I stopped competitive swimming, I still wanted to stay in touch with swimming, because I missed training and I missed my friends and I missed the sport. So what I did was, and that's part of the work I do today, I started running workshops on weekends. So on a Saturday, Sunday, around the country for swimmers. So my workshops would include, of course, in-pool work where I would be a coach and I would help swimmers with their technique and with their race practice and all that. And then after that was over, I would do a 20 to 30 minute speech or a speaking session with the swimmers on land with their parents also. So, and that would end with a little bit of my story and of my life, and then Q&A. So one of the workshops I was doing in Bombay, after the workshop, a swimming parent came up to me and said that, why don't you come and speak at my office? Because you've got a nice way of delivering your message. You are inspiring to, youngsters. Why don't you come and speak at my office? So 2 weeks later, I went into his office and I did the 45-minute talk that I told you about, which was the motivational talk. And then through word of mouth, through social media, it spread that I'm doing this. And then that's how I got more and more assignments. I did a lot of TED Talks initially at different colleges and schools. But like TED Talks don't pay. And I had to find some way to fund my second sport, which is golf. So then I moved to doing more college, school talks, and then corporate talks as well. And that's basically how, I started with motivational speaking. My assignments increased after my stint on Star Sports. I don't know how many of you all watched the 2016 Olympics. So I basically was asked to host the Olympics on Star Sports, the 1 hour show that you do before the day's events start. So once people saw me more on television, we started getting a lot more inquiries for these speaking engagements as well.
Sir, as you just mentioned about a lot of skills you had, golf or swimming, and again TED Talks you do, how do you manage to excel in multiple talents?
Okay, so that question is a huge compliment in itself, and you see everything. I think for me, the foundation of everything is my love for sport. Okay, and like I said, I love swimming so much that when I left swimming, or I stopped swimming, I figured out a way to stay in touch with swimming, which was my workshops. And then from my workshops came the motivational speaking. And then when, honestly, people in the Star Sports studio saw me on Facebook or coaching a bunch of kids, they said, this guy has a good rapport with kids. Let's call him to Star Sports and make him a TV presenter. So, I feel that one thing has led to another in my life. And I've been very lucky that, like a domino effect, I've been able to do so many things. But when you talk about, I don't know what word you used. You said, how are you so good at it? You used a very kind word. But everything that I do or I am asked to do, it's not a trick really. I try to keep an open mind and learn. And when I say learn, this is one thing that I feel, and I'll compliment myself very happily about, is that I am an excellent student. And to be an excellent student, you have to have zero ego. Okay, and again, I'm so glad that I'm talking to students your age. Like I said a little earlier, when I compete, my ego is massive. But when I am sitting down to learn a craft, I have no ego whatsoever. So when I went to the golf course, my coach on my first day of golf was a guy younger than me, and he was just a golf coach. And I spent 45 minutes with him, and at the end of the session, he said, Rehan, I'm not able to understand that I'm coaching an Olympian. And not only am I coaching an Olympian, I am feeling like I am bigger and better than you. Because of the way you've treated me, because of the way the coach-student relationship was. And that's how it should be, where if you are being taught something by someone, you first of all have to have absolutely no ego. Your mind has to be open to learning. And you have to always be ready to start at the bottom. So for example, when I swam, I've given you so much background on my swimming. When I played golf, I've just told you about my first day at golf. With travel writing, I actually have a travel partner who is my manager, and she writes a lot of content for the blog, and I'm constantly learning from her on how to write better. Or whether it is speaking, I go for speech classes with people who have performed in the industry on stage, who are great at speaking. If I'm learning a new hobby today, which is through this lockdown, I've been learning about watches. and something that y'all may like because it's all about mechanics, right? And gears and levers, and it's a beautiful field. And I am enjoying the process of learning. So the point I'm trying to make is that as what's the word? As colorful and as amazing as the result looks of your goal. So for example, if you want to one day run a company that goes international and be sitting on the board of directors and walking in, in a fancy suit, driving in with a BMW, and that's your idea of success and how amazing all that looks. You have to also, and it's learn the art of enjoying the process of getting to success. Okay, and the reason I use the word learn is because this does not come naturally to many people, and it did not come naturally to me. I mean, think about it. To be a 10-year-old kid asked to get into water that's 8 degrees of temperature, you cannot possibly be enjoying it. So everybody thinks that when you're successful, oh, he loved what he did. It's not possible. You're hypocritical if you say, I loved every day I practiced swimming. It's not possible. You cannot possibly love every day of studying, right? So we have in our mind 10 years from now what we want to be. And then along the way, we have the process. And the word I used was you have to learn to enjoy the process as well. So for me, the process of learning a new craft, if it is getting in front of a television, I remember I did 14 days of workshops before my first day of shoot on Star Sports, because the television show was live. And on a live show, and it's my first show, you cannot make mistakes. And if you make mistakes, you're not going to get to edit out, what you say. So I was so careful about what I said, but delivery of dialogue, how you sit in front of a camera, and so much more. I could only do as well as I did, and I know I wasn't great at it, but because I was open to learning, and I enjoyed the art of learning it. So when you say, why are you so good at so many things? It's not like, God walked into my room and said, Rehan, what do you want to do? And I said, okay, I want to be a golfer. And he says, okay, in 10 years, you will be a golfer. And it's not like he put christened me and put a sword on my head and said, okay, King Rehan, you're going to be king of the pool. Now you're going to be king of TV. It doesn't work like that. And and that's pretty much my answer, that you have to be open to learning, and you just take your ego and throw it out of the window. And this is the last thing I'm going to say with this topic. I would learn from the 9-year-old kid in my swimming pool. When I came back an Olympian, and I was 23 when I came back from Beijing, from China as an Olympian, I felt that I'm doing something wrong with my breaststroke, which is one of the 4 strokes. So I would go and watch the 9-year-old state champion using his legs in breaststroke to try and figure out what he's doing well that I can do. Now, I could not possibly do that if I had an ego to walk into a swimming pool and say, oh, look who's here, it's Rehan Pocha. It doesn't work like that. So always be open to learning. It's great to have an attitude. It's fantastic to be arrogant also. But there is a very fine line between being arrogant because of your hard work and being arrogant because you're delusional. Okay, so that's, and arrogant can always convert to self-confidence that people don't need to see. In your mind, if you're going in for an exam that is important for you, in your mind, you can be arrogant and pass a statement that says, I'm going to cream everybody in my class. But they don't need to know it. But that arrogance has to come from the hard work you do, not from the big ego that you have.
Also, sir, you just told us how you decided to choose swimming as a hobby, and later you took a decision as swimming as a career.
Yeah.
How did your family support? Were your parents you took that decision? So
I'll tell you the age at which I realized swimming would be a career was I think at 13, where it was in 1999, and I had turned. It was my first national championship, and I felt I had reached a big level of success. And at that time, I had a choice, again, with academics, like I mentioned, and also trying to do something else with my time. And my parents, I have been very lucky that my parents were always supportive with my goals and my dreams. And they did so, they could be like that because they saw that they didn't have to, wake me up in the morning and hit me and say, go to practice. It came from me, right? So I was lucky that I had parents that could support my sport, but I also contributed to that level of confidence that they had in me, where I knew that I don't have to top my class, but my father always said that if you come back with bad grades, I don't care which tournament you're going for, you will miss swimming practice, you will get good grades. Okay? You cannot be failing. You cannot be messing up in even semester tests or whatever it is. No bad remarks or reports from your teachers when I was in the 7th and 8th and 9th and 10th. So while my parents always supported my sport, I was never under any false sort of feeling that I can completely ignore academics and they are going to still support my swimming. And my dad always said that you mess up your studies, I don't care about your swimming. You're going to go back to school and make sure your grades are good. So, but they were supportive. And when there were times when funds were low, we didn't have enough money to support my training, my diet, nutrition trainers. My dad spent a lot of his savings to support me. And, there are so many ways in which an Indian parent today supports an athlete. I cannot speak for everybody here. I cannot speak for kids around the country, but successful athletes are not successful only because of themselves. I'm talking about India, but they are successful because more often than not, their parents have stood by them and have supported them.
Yes, sir. You just mentioned about your diets, right? So sports person should have to be fit and have like really perfect diet. Can you tell us how you have awesome, fit, and you also manage to have a very good diet and all?
Okay, so for me, for those of you who don't know, I'm Parsi, and Parsis are huge foodies. We basically eat anything and everything. There are no restrictions on on our diet other than the restrictions that the government brings to us. So we are pretty much crazy when it comes to food. A lot of my family's holidays personally, they are planned around food. Okay, up to a point where if I decide that, for example, I want to go to Portugal for a holiday, I will first put down all the things that I want to see, and then I will plan my day based on where we can stop to eat. It does not have to be anything fancy. It can be a stall on a roadside stall that I've read about on or seen on Discovery Channel or National Geographic. It could be that as well. But that's how much we love our food. So you can understand how difficult it's been for me to, and I'm sure all of us are foodies really at some level, to be strict about my diet. Personally, swimming, we are with the kilometers that we swim, we are burning thousands of calories in a day, okay, or through a week. With golf, we are not doing as much aerobic work, which means we are not doing as much cardiovascular work. So we are not burning as many calories in a day that I did when I swam. So intentionally, I have to cut down on the quantity of food I eat and also what I eat. So for swimming, I was encouraged to eat lots of carbohydrates because that's basically my energy. So potatoes, fruits, even dessert, lots of rice, chapatis, anything and everything basically. Sometimes I would have 2 dinners. I would have a dinner at the pool after swimming, and then 1 hour later I would go home and have another second dinner. So you can, from that to come down to eating half a dinner on some days for golf has been difficult. And around that, I also, when I moved from golf to swimming, I put on a lot of weight because I wasn't, like I said, doing as much fitness work. So I have been through a lot of stringent disciplined work with nutritionists to figure out what works best for me and my sport and my diet. And what I'd like to say here is that I know I'm speaking, my answer cannot only be about sportsmen, because there are a lot of you who don't play any sport or don't need to diet really for sport. So, but what I'd like to share is that, and I did a talk with Mandira Bedi, who many of you all must know of, on fitness for a corporate in Pune a few weeks back. And it was only on fitness. And I said over there that, today youngsters, a lot of our youth today get very, 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 very stressed about how what their idea of being fit is, and how they feel they should look in front of a mirror. But a lot of that in their mind, that ideal that they have, is based on social media and what society feels or defines as a fit person. Okay, so stereotypically, a fit person is, okay, this guy's got a broad back, he's got strong legs, look at his 6-pack or 8-pack and chiseled jawline, and then you define him as fit. Okay, for girls, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm sure the girls have 10 other things that they have to deal with. So the point I'm trying to make, and because of the age group I'm talking to you, is do not set your standards, goals, or define fitness based on what you see or hear from people or social media. Your fitness has to be made so you are comfortable for yourself with how you feel, okay, and how you look. And that comes from, I think, looking at social media a lot less. Because as you all know, it's so fake when it comes to visuals on, that you see of what the ideal man or the ideal woman looks like. And I know that this is not connected to sport, but in some way it is connected to well-being, mental health as well. So if you all are planning on dieting, or if you all are planning on getting onto a fitness routine or regime, do it for yourselves and set a standard or goal in your mind where you are happy with yourself, not worrying about what your classmates are thinking of you, of how you look, or so on and so forth.
Yes, sir. That was wonderfully said.
Thank you.
Can you share your best and most difficult win you had in your whole career?
Okay, so I've already talked about the Olympic qualifying. So that one is, I think for sure you can understand, that was, I call my best win. But there's one more win that I'll share with you all. So it was we have the national games, as you all know, in India. So the national games, I think, happens once every 2 or 3 years. And in the national games, you are encouraged to enter and swim as many races as you can, because at the end of 7 days of swimming, you get to be in contention for a trophy that is called the Best Athlete Trophy. So you have a Best Athlete male and you have a Best Athlete female. And this trophy is given by the Prime Minister of India or the President of India to you. And in 2002, among 32 different sports, different across India, the athlete in men and women category that collects the most gold medals is given the trophy. So in 2002, I won the Best Male Athlete trophy at the age of 16. So I had the most gold medals across any Indian of any sport, and I got to go up, and Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee gave me the Best Male Athlete trophy. 4 years later, in 2007, I had to defend that title, which I felt was absolutely impossible. And it all came down to one race, where if I won that race, I would win that trophy. If I lost that race, I would lose the trophy. And it was the 200-meter backstroke, and so that's 4 laps of a swimming pool. My mum was watching the race on Doordarshan in Bombay. I was competing in Guwahati in Assam. And I touched the wall, and the commentator of that race mentioned the other boy who touched very close to me as the winner of that race, because he saw the timing display and he assumed that boy had won. And everybody at home was very disappointed because they realized I hadn't won. And then 30 seconds later, he announced me as the winner. And nobody could understand it. So basically what had happened is we had what we call in swimming, in other sports as well, as a dead heat. So a dead heat is when both swimmers have the exact same timing, up to the fraction of a second. So 2 minutes, 16 seconds, 0.43. So it was, I'm just giving an example. So 0.43 was the same for both of us. And because I tied for that win, I got that last, I think it was the 7th gold medal to get that trophy. So in terms of the most fun I felt, or the most memorable race, this is definitely up there. And the most difficult race for me was, I think I can't pinpoint one difficult race. I think just qualifying, like I said, for the Olympics was the hardest thing I ever did in sport, because like I said, I failed in 2004. I had to try all over again in 2008. And just before my race, 5 minutes before my final chance, you can imagine the pressure that was on me. Thoughts like, what will my parents say if I fail? What will my coaches think? What will my friends say? What will the press in India write? All this pressure was on my head when I went to compete, and I competed with all that pressure and came out successful. So that was, I think, the most, I wouldn't say, it was the most challenging race of my career. Though every race, if you ever go and watch a swimmer race, when he comes out of the swimming pool, he looks like he's going to pass out and he's going to be taken home on a stretcher. And that's what the sport of swimming does to you, like I think most sports do to you when you compete at such a high level. So it's unfair to say this race was the hardest of my career, but in terms of what it meant as an end result, in terms of, and because if I had failed to qualify, I would have probably stopped swimming. So in terms of what it meant, it was mentally and physically the hardest swim of my career.
So what was the best advice you received in your career?
Who's asking this question? I can't see.
Isha.
Okay, maybe you're not on my screen. Okay, so I'll still answer. The best advice I got in my career was when I was okay, I'll give a lot of many coaches. I think 8 or 9 coaches I got to train with. Everybody had something constructive and positive to say to me. If you remember, I talked about the 97 swimming championship when I went to Chinese Taipei, and on the first day of that tournament, like I said, I was so overwhelmed as an 11-year-old. My name was called up. I went to compete, and I saw all these Japanese, Asian, Chinese, Korean, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan kids, 11-year-olds, who were all 1.5 times bigger than me. I don't know why, but they were all 1.5 times bigger than me, and they were all very, very fair. Okay, so Parsis have light colored skin, but they were 3 times as fair as me. So for some reason, I thought that they are much better than me, and they are going to all beat me. And apart from that, there was so much pressure, I started crying. So I went, and of course, with that attitude, I went into the race. I finished, I think, 6th. I went back to the hotel, and there was this coach who told me, and he asked me why I messed up. So I said 2 things. I said I got so nervous before my race that my body became tight. And apart from that, I don't think I can beat them. Look at these people. Look at how they look. So he told me 2 things. He asked me that, think of your race as an exam, and think of your preparation as your studies, your mugging, your tuitions, your everything that you do for your exam. And he asked me, have you done your homework, basically? I said, yes, I've done my homework, which is my preparation. He said, if you've done everything you can, any pressure that you take going into an important day is only going to harm you. And the words that he used, if I were to make it sound a little nicer, he basically said that if you, and all of you really, if you work extremely hard at a certain goal and then you go up, for example, to an interview, and then you're nervous on that day, or you let nerves or self-doubt get the better of you, you are doing a disservice to your own effort. Okay, I'll say it again. You are disrespecting and you are doing a disservice to your own homework and your own effort, which is what he told me. And the second thing he told me, and I know this is not advice really for y'all because y'all don't need to know this, but as an 11-year-old, he told me that whether they are white, they are black, they are brown, or they are pink, they are no different from us. And everything they do, we do as well, and we can do better. Okay. And I went into that the next day's events with that mindset, and through that meet, I came away with 2 bronze medals, which happened to be my first international medals. So if I spend time thinking about more and more advice that I've gotten, there's so much good advice that coaches have given me. But I think advice that you give a youngster is so important and impacts him the most, and he remembers it the most. I'm sure that a good teacher, when you were 10 or 11 years old, you can remember him, his face or her face, what he said so well, or a good experience that you had with a good teacher when you were young, always has a huge impact on your mind. And this is advice that I had, and learning from that advice today when I coach or I mentor swimmers or athletes, I really I realize the importance of being a good teacher because of the effect that good teacher had on me. So even y'all, tomorrow you may have a 12-year-old from school or a friend's friend come up to you and ask you about engineering or the course that you're doing. My advice to you is be patient with people who ask for your help and do your best, for them. There is also something called karma, where if you can educate, you can inspire, you can give part of your learning and your expertise to somebody who may not have that opportunity to gain that knowledge. Your karma is good and you're doing a huge service, and it always comes back. I do it with my swimming classes. If I am booked by a parent to coach his kid for 30 minutes, I do 40 minutes. If it's a 1 hour session, I do 1 hour 15 minutes. If I've committed 1 hour to y'all, if y'all have the time, I will speak to y'all for 1.5 hours, even if y'all are falling asleep and I'm boring the hell out of you. But the attitude that I'm trying to show is that always give more than you're asked of. Is anybody on a salary here today? I don't think I'm talking to. Do you all have jobs? Do any of you all? Nobody, right? You're all still studying. But there will be one day when you go into a job, you go into the outside world. And, this is advice, and it's not from a coach, it's from my mother. My mother always says to me, if you are being paid, for example, 5,000 rupees to do something, give the client 8,000 rupees worth. And if you're being paid nothing also, let the client go back and say, my God, if we had gone out looking for this in the market, it would have cost us 10,000 bucks. I'm just giving you an example. If you can take that attitude into life, you will always be successful. And the last thing, and now that I'm remembering, another coach had told me, never look at your watch. Never look at the time. Because think about it, if tomorrow you become a parent and you're excited with taking your child to his first day of tennis, and you book a 30-minute class with a coach who's charging you a ridiculous amount of money because he may be very good at what he's doing and he may deserve that sort of fee. And every 15 minutes he looks at his watch, how are you going to feel? So never look at your watch. Give the client more than he feels you are worth, or just do that. It's karma. It always comes back to you. And if nothing else, you build such a good reputation in the market, in society, that again, it will always come back to you with blessings. So that's advice that has been given to me. I have learned off and I'm giving to you all.
Thank you. So that was such an inspiring and motivating session. Thank you so much, sir, for being humble enough to make time for us and telling us about your journey.
Most welcome.
And we are grateful to you for making us realize the important role sports plays in our life. We would love to see you achieving even more and motivating us in the future. We are very thankful that you joined us today and gave us time and your effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you guys have a time limit on this thing?
Yeah, sir.
Sorry?
1 hour time limit. 1 hour time limit for this.
Okay. I'll end by saying you're most welcome, and I thank you all for the opportunity as well. I got to see Nitin, Medha, Neha, Tejasvi, Yash, Ishan, and Anil Verma, who I don't think is really Anil Verma, and Isha. And that's the faces I got to see. I got to see 70, 80 people there, but the faces that I saw, I'm so sad that I couldn't do this live, because when I speak, I like to speak to an audience and look at their expression and look at their face. So I had 9 of you, and I'm glad that I got smiles too. So thank you very much. And hopefully, guys, if you're on social media, connect with me. If you ever need help or advice, always write. And I get a lot of DMs. I try and go through it, but I will like. Yeah, what's my favorite Bollywood actor? Otherwise, I will always reply. I love talking to friends and fans. So always approach and ask for advice. I will give you. Okay, see you everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Nice session, everyone.